Welcome to Refrigerator Moms. This episode is titled Something to See Here, Autism and Masking. Juliana, what is masking? You hear all about it on social media.
Yeah, you do. So according to the National Autistic Society, masking is defined as a strategy used by some autistic people consciously or unconsciously to appear non-autistic. So it can also be called social camouflaging, a use of compensatory strategies, or passing.
Passing. And what is the difference between masking and a behavioral change?
Well, therapeutic behavioral change is made with the buy-in of the autistic person and focuses on the effects on the autistic person, whereas masking uses public perception, shame, and judgment as the driving force and requires significant and continuous effort expended to maintain the behavior change. So this is not something that an autistic person necessarily is coming to internally. It's like outside pressure
to behave,
to change, yes, to conform.
So Amy Schumer has this documentary out, Room to Move, and her goal, she says, with this documentary is to destigmatize autism. I think a lot of what she's talking about is the need to perform, right? To look a certain way, to act a certain way, say certain things in society as a large, in order to get ahead, right?
Yeah, and I'm really anxious to watch that documentary. I don't think it's available yet. I think she's just making the rounds on the festival circuit, but it's about letting people take off that mask. Right. I know she's connected to it because her husband kind of had a late diagnosis, I think, while they were still together.
And I know that you sometimes get agitated because that word, I know you have an issue with the Armchair Experts.
I do.
Where they had incredible misinformation about masking. Tell everybody what you think
I do want to talk about this because I think this really represents the issue and throwing around this terminology, which I think can be harmful because it's well, let me just give you the example. So Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. He had an episode with Suzanne O'Sullivan, a neurologist and clinical neuropsychologist, and she wrote a book on overdiagnosis. So this came up in that context. Okay. So Dax was saying, so he said that, we're also including in the diagnosis, like something which people are calling masking. And masking is you don't appear in any way autistic, but you feel autistic on the inside. This concept of masking or camouflaging made complete sense for people with severe autism. And then he says, there's a program on TV, I don't know if you've seen it, called Love on the Spectrum. Well, of course we've seen it. So he says, there's really lovely examples of masking in that, where you kind of see that the people are being taught. When you go on this date, you have back and forth conversations, you can see them masking in the sense that they're learning the social rules and applying them, but it doesn't really look completely natural ever. The masking is obvious. Well, here's the thing. They're not masking on that show.
No.
They're well aware of the situation. These are usually two people with autism,
right.
Meeting each other. And actually, the whole point of that show is that they're really letting taking their masks off
and being themselves.
themselves. Yeah. So what he might be referring to is sort of the social niceties, like you need to ask somebody, about their interests, not about your interests.
Right.
Well, that's a social skill we should all learn. But on Love on the Spectrum in particular, a lot of those people on there, they're all about their special interests. And they're looking for people who kind of jive with those special interests and who really accept them for who they are. Like, they're not really trying to change, their behavior to fit in any kind of neurotypical way.
Right.
These are all people who are pretty proud of their differences.
Right.
So that is not masking. So, we've talked about this, asking somebody on a date what they're interested in, that's, kind of giving to get.
Right.
Like, that isn't masking.
That's transactional.
It's very transactional. And that makes sense to somebody with autism. It's like, well, if you want to go on another date, this is kind of how you function. You can't just both be staring at each other.
And it might be the mask part in that example might be that, you have to ask this person what they like to do or what they do for a living. And
Right.
you might notice that they smell really weird, or that their clothing doesn't look right, or some esoteric thing about them, and what you know is you have to not say anything.
Right.
So you are trying to ignore the sensory input. That would be the mask that you would put on so that you could continue that conversation. Right. Not asking them what they're interested in.
No.
That is a behavioral change.
Right. Right. So I think there is a lot of confusion about what it actually looks like with someone with autism. So what about your son? Does he mask?
I would go so far as to say he doesn't know how. But he does understand that certain behavior is not allowed, or not allowed, or doesn't serve him.
Yeah.
When he veers off from quote unquote weird behavior into behavior that is outside the bounds of common sense or being polite, right?
Yeah.
So he loves to do this thing in the airport. He loves to go to the airport and he sees a badge, he sees someone's name tag, and he wants to say the name. And then he wants to say hello and salutations, and it's nice to see you. Oh, hi, Juliana. And, when you're in the airport, anytime people have a badge on, they forget that you can see their name.
Right. Yes.
So he instantly shocks people. And sometimes in the airport, because he can see from miles away the tag on their luggage that might have their name, Juliana.
Yeah.
So he's calling out to Juliana, who does not know him. And people's reaction to that very odd thing to do tells him everything he needs to know about whether or not he can keep engaging them, right? So
okay, so he's getting input from society,
telling him,
to
how does he know my name?
Right.
So that would be wrong, and then
So
he would ignore it, or it would be wrong for him if a person thinks that's rude and doesn't want to engage him to keep trying to force the engagement, right? And so that's a behavioral change we'd have to make. But if he just wants to call out someone's name and that's just weird, and some people like it and some people don't, that's fine.
Yeah, no. I mean, my son definitely, I had this conversation with him a little bit, and, he is, at first he was just like, well, I don't mask. And then as we got, into the conversation a little bit more, because he is very much himself.
Yeah.
But at work, he definitely does. Like, he's not, like, quote unquote out at work, so, make sure that he doesn't do some of the typical things that people who mask do, like, overshare on special interests, things like that. So, in the workplace, for sure. This episode of Refrigerator Moms is brought to you by Brain Performance Technologies. Brain Performance Technologies is a specialty mental health clinic that offers magnetic resonance therapy, or MERT, for autistic people aged 3 or older. MERT is a transcranial magnetic stimulation protocol that utilizes an EEG diagnostic to deliver personalized magnetic pulses to stimulate the brain and build neural pathways effective in managing autistic symptoms.
Let's get into that. Let's get some good examples of what masking looks like and why it's important. Having a mask is an important tool for us all, for definitely for an autistic person that has ambitions and functions in society. But in order to know when to take a mask off, you have to have a really good understanding of when you have to put it on, right? So masking might be mirroring your dress to those you see around you. So if you go to work and everybody has a suit on and a suit is miserable for you, but you expect to wear a suit because that's what's going on in the workplace, that would be an example of masking, right? That suit and tie.
Right. Or like hiding a stim. And I feel like, that's easier to mask these days once like fidget spinners and things like that became really popular for students, especially.
Right.
Like, that kind of fidget became, used to be kind of exclusively autistic kids would use fidgets.
Or sometimes, putting, because of the input from the noise all around you, put your hands on your ears, but now you could just keep your headphones in.
Right. Your even wear your headphones.
Yeah.
That like a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah.
But also like asking more questions than you might not be comfortable doing. So like, you have to have those sort of transactional, oh, how are you, like, inquire, how are people doing? Like for a long time, my son would, in order to get to the conversations he wanted to have, he kind of knew he needed to do that kind of transactional
give to get.
Yeah, give to get, like, and that, again, that's probably more behavior than masking. That's why this is such a weird gray area sometimes.
Yeah. But if you have to do it for everything, if you have to give to get all day, then eventually it's on top of the sensory needs that you have. Eventually, you're exhausted from it all, right? Planning what to say in advance, that's another thing. It is a lot of times, okay, I know that I have to ask these 3 questions. What did you do this weekend? You know, and sometimes life's and the opportunity to ask your 3 questions that you had practiced will not come up because there's an emergency or there's people are talking about something else. That's exhausting if you miss that cue that read the room and you have a zero ability to read the room.
And also, masking isn't always good masking. Like, sometimes it still looks a little weird or off because you might be try to put that mask on, but it's not, maybe it slips a little bit, or maybe it's so, you're putting, people on the spectrum are putting so much energy and effort into it. It's exhausting. And sometimes it slips a little bit, or there's some stiltedness to it. So the mask isn't, 100% on there.
So we talked a little bit about why someone would choose to mask, the fit in socially, succeed at work or school, interpersonal goals to achieve, and an understanding that masking is part of getting where they want to go. Sometimes they can even choose to all these things unconsciously. It could be an unconscious choice to put a mask on, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think school is a good example because I think a lot of kids feel that pressure, like maybe they were teased or bullied or anything. They're not thinking like, oh, well, then I need to, do this. They just start to conform a little bit and just like, okay, I know unconsciously, okay, if I start copying them and repressing some of the things that are my natural inclinations, I'm going to get along better, or I'm going to go with the routine. Like, for example, so my son was in a special day class, but the masking wasn't so much as socially fitting in, but it was the routine. It was like fitting in, like, I want to push against all of these, like, these rules and how I need to act in this class. I don't want to withhold what I'm saying to students or teachers or anything like that, even though, the consequence of that in that environment might not have been as bad, although he was on the playground and he was saying things and he was like, it was starting to the mask was starting to crack. So he would hold it together at school as best he could. And then he would come home and let down, which is really common.
Yes.
Our home is a safe space to unmask.
Yes.
So I think that's really common for a lot of kids. And it should be. I mean, the home should be a place where masks are off.
We used to say, if he's doing well at school, he can do whatever he wants at home, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were happy that he was, we didn't think of it as putting a mask on, but we were happy he was like holding it together there.
And we would take all of that bad behavior or negative maladaptive behavior at home.
But the problem with that too is, he would come up, we would warn the school. It's like, okay, he's really having meltdowns at home. It's just a matter of time before it starts. Yeah, the mask starts to crack. We didn't say it like that at the time, of course. And sure enough, it started on the playground and then it started happening in the classroom. And they were, like, what's going on? Like, this isn't the kid we know. And I'm like, actually, that's exactly the kid. Like, that is who he is. Like, he is. And so that's the problem. It's just like, they're not seeing who that person really is because that mask is on.
And sometimes that's why people have chosen to take off the mask, or he didn't choose to take off the mask. It just fell off because it was so too exhausting. It was too many hours to hold it together. It was too many routines to follow. It was too much to do. And that is one of the things that we all need to be conscious of when we are asking an autistic person at school or even at work. If an autistic person is asking themselves to behave a certain way, that mask has got to come off eventually.
Right. And that's what's important at that point, to kind of help them with that transition of taking that mask off. If it just falls off, or if you just rip it off, the results aren't always so great. Like, it's jarring for everybody involved.
And especially the autistic person.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're getting the reaction to that mask coming off.
Right.
And again, all of that pressure of expectation. So, unconscious or conscious, holding that mask on is really hard. And ultimately, people do stop masking, whether it's, again, the exhaustion, the overstimulation, just fried, or sometimes, even as adults, they might just choose to stop masking because they're just like, I don't,
Why should I?
what? Yeah, like, again, the sort of like, let my freak flag fly. Like, it's harmless. This isn't screaming at people in a classroom or something. This is just like, you know what? I want to just be more myself.
Right.
And they take it off that way. And they can deal with the consequences. Usually if you're doing that, the risk of taking off that mask and you feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And so what's the difference between masking or code switching or something neurotypical person, a mask and neurotypical? If I were going to be going into a very difficult business meeting and I know I was going to have to exercise diplomacy, I was going to have lunch with a friend who I know is prone to certain behaviors, and so I go into that with a certain level of masking. What's the difference between that and autistic masking or code switching?
Pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing is different really in function or execution. I mean, we all mask. I know I do it. I definitely, like, if I'm around a certain group of people, maybe I'm not going to swear all the time. I'm not going to swear on this podcast. Or maybe even amongst groups of friends.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't advertise that I am a member of the Jane Austen Society. Maybe I keep that
Which is
under the
one
mask.
of the most awesome things about it. And one of our papers is going to be all about Jane Austen.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
gonna do it.
Well, I do think we should do something on special interests.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, we all do it.
Yeah.
So, that's the question, the kind of the difference is, it's like other disabilities, autistic people are functioning in this world not designed for them. And so they're expected to take on that burden of, putting on that mask, they're required to kind of accommodate other people. And this also comes up a lot about, how much of that mask should you put on? And I pulled out something that I had read a while ago. It was in the New York Times, sorry. And it was a workplace sort of advice column. And it came up, it was about how to talk to a neurodiverse colleague. And a reader wrote in to inquire about what she should do regarding a colleague on the autism spectrum who interacts with a wide variety of other colleagues in a semi-public role and who behaves, as the reader put it, always in ways that are brusque and rude to them. And the advice columnist said that this seems like less of an issue of emotional intelligence or personality diversity than just plain obnoxiousness, obstinance, and entitlement, and said this guy is obviously a lost cause. And
ouch.
She got all the pushback.
Oh boy.
And people calling her, ableist, offensive, uninformed, blatantly bigoted. Everyone was just fuming. But it brought up a really interesting this weird gray area, right? Of like what masks, are sort of, expected, required, what should they do? And should a neurodiverse person in the workplace, get a coach, and then so this advice columnist spoke to somebody who is a neurodiversity consultant who does job coaching and kind of explains to that person, you shouldn't say, we use these words or be brusque or, all of those sort of those softeners that need to be used, putting a little bit of that mask back on. But then it also kind of begs the question, how much responsibility should those people in the workplace take? Should they be more tolerant of that or just say, and give them a pass or say, or look at it from their perspective. Well, they might seem brusque, but they're a perfectionist and they're just trying to get the best work out of somebody.
Well, I think that is just, first of all, communication, better communication. If you are a person that's neurodivergent, you still have to have a certain level of behavior. to function in the workplace. That's the first
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, nobody should be a jerk.
No, but how often are you rude? Is it all the time? Do you have some great moments? Is it part of a team building that you are making progress, or are you just stuck in a behavior pattern? Because neurodivergent or not, we all need to be conscious of other people's feelings. I mean, that's
Yeah,
who we
I
are
think
as human
that's
beings.
across the board.
Yes. But you reach an interesting point, which I was thinking when you were talking about neurodiversity coach in the workplace. Ideally, that worker would have had that coaching as a child or a teen, right?
Right.
But so this is a little bit more common in the late diagnosis.
I was just going to say, I think that it happens a lot in the late diagnosis. Or maybe, I mean, obviously you wouldn't get a neurodiversity coach if you don't know you're on the spectrum.
Right.
But, maybe that sometimes even prompts you. It's like, okay, if I'm not working well with others.
Right.
I think sometimes that goes into, okay, maybe there is something, maybe it's me, not you. I don't know.
But what did I do? What am I doing wrong?
Right. Right. What's not computing? But that late diagnosis thing. So I think that masking relationship does change if, depending on the age of diagnosis.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are diagnosed late, they've been doing a lot of masking.
Yeah. Well, I can come back. My son obviously had an early diagnosis, and the difference between early diagnosis, people viewing masking as opposed to late diagnosis. I keep coming back to the example of him wanting to shout out everybody's name in the airport. He knows through years of behavioral training that if someone says "leave me alone" or is just rude or ignores him, move on. It's not like he would keep going because he understands that that's the behavior that his behavior is not appealing to that other person. And I think that's the difference between an early diagnosis and a lot of behavioral training and a lot of trying to understand interpersonal relationships than somebody who has a late diagnosis where maybe never anybody told them that.
Or especially as I know a lot of girls are diagnosed late. Maybe, as young girls, they're bullied in school, and there's a lot of peer pressure to conform, which all girls are subjected to. So, okay, some are the bullies, some are the bullied, but so not everybody is subjected to it.
Ouch.
But
I think I know where you think.
I know which one I was. Thanks, bullies. I'm a stronger person for it.
Yes, you are.
But by learning, you learn from that rejection, from people telling you, you're being weird, that you're like, oh, I better not be weird.
Right. Or you learn to just go with
or
it.
Or you just learn to be like, okay, I just don't care what you think.
Right.
But if you're, often you are pushed into that mask.
Yes.
And so without knowing that there's some underlying, social communication issues that are really confounding factors that, you might not really be reading the situation or understanding the situation. And that would really help, or be getting those therapies to help you deal with that, or having that soft place to fall at home and let up a little bit and just, take a breath and be yourself, or, make a concerted effort to find those friends where you can be yourself. And that doesn't happen till much later.
All right, so now we've arrived at the what would we do's. And again, all this information is in our paper on our website, refrigeratormoms.com.
Along with a lot of other stuff that we didn't cover.
That's right.
So go there.
So yes, and if our child wants to unmask and faces social backlash as a result, what would we do? So this is an interesting question, and it kind of comes back to my son being weird in the airport. What is the harm? Mm-hmm. Is it something harmless? Is he behaving badly? And is he disturbing people? So that's where you sort of draw the line. Where is the harm in what he's doing? And if it's just a matter of people that don't get it, then, then, oh well. Maybe I'll even dye my hair green with you. But if it is that he's inconveniencing people, legitimately inconveniencing people, then, you have to have and then that's becomes a behavioral item that we have to work on, right? A social story, whatever your method of delivering. Yeah. Hey, not everybody wants to be greeted by you screaming at them in the airport.
Yeah, that actually, as you were saying that, I was remembering, I guess this is not great to confess to, but there were times where I kind of put the mask on my son. And I say this like because of the social backlash. Like he really loved the color pink. He loved My Little Pony. He loved sparkly everything, tassels, sparkly shoes, all these things. And I guess he was probably in maybe third grade, I guess, maybe. Oh, he liked pink before that. I remember there was a whole day in kindergarten class where he had this really cute Brooks Brothers pink polo shirt that my mom had gotten him. He loved it, and he wanted to wear it as much as possible. And of course, he wore it to kindergarten. It was a mainstream kindergarten class. And everyone gave him grief for it.
Which just seems so strange.
I know, kindergarten. And the teacher made this whole thing about like, pink is an everyone color and all this stuff. It didn't really make a difference. So he, didn't wear that to school as much. But it came a point where he really wanted, we were shopping for shoes, and he really wanted these sparkly pink tennis shoes. And I just said, I love these shoes. I love that you love these shoes. But other people might not love that you love these shoes. And are you ready for that? Like, are you ready for the social backlash? If someone teases you about this, are you going to be okay with that? And he said no. It wasn't as calm a conversation as this was, but he's like, no. And I said, well, when you're ready
to wear that and not care.
Wear that and not care.
Right.
I'll get you those shoes.
And I'll get a pair match. And we'll go together. But yes, it has to be.
So, instead his room was pink. His My Little Ponies were all,
I remember
in
the fuzzy layer. He had a fuzzy layer.
He did have a fuzzy layer.
He would go to. Yes. It was all pink.
It was all pink, and it had fluffy blankets. It had tassels.
Yes.
It was the fuzzy layer.
But that is a perfect example of going home and unmasking.
Absolutely.
Because you don't want anybody to know that you love pink, which is your right to love pink.
Yeah.
But you have to be ready to deal with that. And you get to that point of where your level of comfort is for dealing with other people's scrutiny of you when you get there.
Right.
That is your business when you're going to get there, and you put the pink shoes on when you're there, right?
Right.
And in the meantime, it is perfectly acceptable to have the pink shoes on in your room.
Right. And now, as an adult, this goes into our next question that we address is if our kids want to keep their masks on. And, as an adult, my son, admits like he wants to keep that mask on at work. Yeah. And sometimes, it slips a little, like he has to go to work dinners and things like that where there's, food he doesn't want. He's very particular about food, and, he'll get some, ribbing. I think it's gentle. He thinks it's gentle ribbing. From all accounts, he's well liked at work. So I think it is gentle ribbing. But he is, like I said, he's not out at work. He's not, the mask is
on. That's where he's comfortable.
And that's fine. Right. Like, I think he doesn't, I don't think he's expending that much energy with that mask. Yeah. So I think to him, it's worth it. And that's what I always want to make sure, like, are you exhausted by this, or is this something that you're willingly doing?
And do you have an outlet for it? So this leads into our next question. If someone was hesitant to pursue therapy for their masking skills because they thought it would minimize their autism, or vice versa, if they were just hesitant to learn more about themselves, what would we do? What would we recommend? And, again, good communication starts with communicating with yourself and knowing what your needs are.
Right.
And you have to have an honest conversation about what your goals are, what you want for yourself, and whether or not this mask is serving you. So sometimes if the burden and the weight of the mask is too much, then you might need some help taking it off and just being yourself. If you feel like you can handle it because you have a great coping mechanisms for taking that mask off,
right,
then I think it's fine. And I think that all boils down to how much help you have, how many trusted sources you have to talk to.
Yeah, and really learning what you need. Like, yes, maybe if you're in college, you need a single room.
Yes.
You can go back and just let down and be yourself and have that private space. So you don't have to keep a mask on in front of roommates and everyone else. Like, right, find those coping tools.
You might, at work, you might be exhausted by having to go out to lunch every day with colleagues, because that 1 hour to yourself where everybody's gone to lunch, it's time to take your mask off, breathe deeply, just dive into Lake Me for a while.
Yep.
You have to know that about yourself. And again, as so many of these things are trial and error and a really honest, deep conversation with trusted people and with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So we answer more of these questions in the paper, like if someone we know starts acting autistic and calls it unmasking. So go to the paper at refrigeratormoms.com.
All right, so we are at the to-do list portion of the paper. Again, the entire list is on our website in the paper. In the immediate, so all of our to-do lists are broken out into immediate, short-term, long-term, and blocked. Don't ever do this.
No.
In the immediate, mask or unmask consciously, meaning that be aware that you're doing it, have a deep understanding of what your mask is for and how it's serving you. Ask for accommodations so that you can take the mask off when you need them.
Yeah, like the single room, fuzzy layer.
The fuzzy layer. Get a fuzzy layer.
Get a fuzzy layer.
I think you everybody
immediately.
I'm going to go get one right now. Identify your goals for yourself. And again, this is something that is constantly tweaked. And as a parent, you are doing this when your child is very young, and it's a good habit. Identify what your goals are. Identify when you're ready to walk around in peak, sparkly shoes, and mask accordingly.
Yep.
So that your mask serves you.
Yeah. So in the short term, I would say you could develop and practice a plan for escaping situations in the event the mask is slipping or needs to come off. So, excuse yourself. Yeah. And that goes for any kind of high stress environment.
Absolutely.
When someone's on the spectrum, they often hit that wall.
Yes.
Yeah, you can have a little thing like, oh, I just need a minute. And take a beat.
Have it built into the day.
Yep.
And keep going with developing new ones, because as your challenges increase, maybe your need for a break increase. So you're always looking for a new coping mechanism or way to communicate what your needs are. Practice new skills and activities as you're dipping your toe into the,
Yeah, and that's like you do that with trusted people. So you can get some feedback.
Right.
Yeah.
If you really want to learn to go to the movies because it's a social thing and you're a teenager and everybody's going to the movies, you might not want to start with a 3-hour feature film with a group of people you don't know very well, right? Yeah. You might want to start taking in the last half of the movie with a trusted friend, one person, and
seeing how you tolerate it.
See how you tolerate it, seeing when you tolerate it, getting some good information about what you need to be able to go to the movies to be sociable.
Yeah. So long term, it's really we suggest expanding your circle of people who understand and can accommodate you. Yes. I mean, the goal would be to not mask. Yes, everybody masks, but I mean, it would be lovely if we didn't. Yeah. But so the goal is to be as unmasked as you want to be.
Yes.
So, find those people where you can do that.
Right. And always practice boundaries and honest dialogue about behavior and what is appropriate and it's not appropriate behavior for communicating your needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blocked.
Okay, we've got some of those.
So, don't try to mask constantly.
Yeah.
You are not going to white knuckle it through your whole life. You're going to need a break.
Yeah. Don't mask behaviors that are weird or unexpected but harmless. Okay, I'm coming out. I'm saying I am a member of the Jane Austen Society of North America, the Northern California region. So anyone who didn't know that before, they know now.
Rock on, Jane.
Hardcore Janeites.
That's right.
And that isn't the weirdest thing I do that I hide. But
let's leave it at that right now.
Well, I'll just sprinkle those in occasionally. I'll confess to some of I'll unmask occasionally.
This is important. Don't use the term unmasking to behave dangerously or cruelly or to excuse bad behavior.
No, there's no excuse for bad behavior.
And you don't want that for yourself, and you certainly don't want to put the people in your life in the position of defending your dangerous behavior. So don't let it get to that far.
Yeah. And I think we should end with this one. Don't use masking as a crutch to avoid therapy and healthy behavioral management tools. Just saying like, oh, this is who I am, take it or leave it when you're behaving poorly or, you could be getting more out of your life.
And you deserve more. You deserve everything you want in life.
You don't have to mask, but don't use it as a crutch. Like find other ways.
Yes.
So Kelley, why did we want to have this conversation?
Well, we have been seeing masking and the term autistic masking all over social media. It's having a moment in time right now. Actresses are talking about it, making documentaries about it. People are having it on their podcast. It's the subject of their podcast. So if we're going to be talking about it and we're going to be acknowledging the use of masks, then we should understand its usefulness.
And what they are and what they aren't.
And how it helps us and how when it doesn't serve us.
Right.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Something to see here, Autism and Masking. You can find it and more information on our website. And please let us know what you think and what you want to hear next. What should we research and what should you tell us that you want to hear?
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Refrigerator Moms. We have a free download that includes a full list of practical to-dos we shared in this episode on our website. Our refrigerator paper, our version of the white paper, includes additional what would we do's and background information on everything we talked about today. Find it on our website, refrigeratormoms.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. We'd also love to hear your questions. Send them in along with future podcast topics by connecting with us on your favorite social media.
Thanks for listening.
Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only, and it is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The opinions and views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests. Any recommendations or suggestions made are based on personal experiences and beliefs and should not be taken as definitive advice. It's important to consult with appropriate professionals for personalized guidance. A full list of citations and sources for this episode can be found in our refrigerator paper available on our website.